because looking at the target that ends in 2025 and we are in 2023, so barely we have 2 years and some months to cover. And
how long have we been working towards achieving this target?
I think since even before the SDGs came into force, because Ghana started the issue of child labor addressing it since the early 2000s, and we've been in this throughout. And I must say that it's not only Ghana, but it's a global issue, and that is why this Sustainable Development Goals, a target was allocated for just dedicated to the elimination of child labor. So government is doing a lot. As we go on, we may run through some of the things government is doing in collaboration with other partners as well. But what we're saying is that looking at the target and then the efforts, it may not be efficient enough, or it may not be sufficient to address it by 2025. So we need to, in fact, intensify these efforts, and not any other time, but now.
We have to do it now.
Now.
When the global conversation of child labor is taking place, Africa occupies a special place because we are in a cultural system which allows for children to help out in certain areas around the home and even in society, just to grow character. So in that context, there are some issues we do not consider child labor in some of our communities. Where is the line drawn? Because there is a line.
Thank you very much. Let me use the opportunity to greet your sharing listeners and viewers. Let's say that the concept of child labor is not about children not being involved in any work at all. Like you rightly put it, children are supposed to help their parents at home and also use that opportunity as a form of socialization or training, so that in the future they will become responsible persons in the future. What we are talking about when it comes to child labor is any engagement of a child. A child is somebody who is below the age of 18. Any engagement of such a person in any work that would prevent him or her from benefiting from school activities, also harmful to the health of that child, and finally to the development of that child. That is what we call child labor. But any other work that the child is involved in that does not affect these three elements that I mentioned, it's not considered child labor. And also we need to consider the age of the child. When we are looking at the work that we give to a child, we need to look at the age, whether that work that the child is doing is age appropriate. It commensurates with the child's age. So we are not saying children should not work at all. They can help their parents. Yeah.
You talked about what government has done, Peter, and what government is doing to make sure that we bring these numbers down. You're saying the 2025 target, we might miss it, but if we set to work immediately, we could make a lot of gains. So what is happening to make sure that we make those gains?
Thank you once again. And in order to address the issue, I think the very first step is to come up with laws and regulations. So in terms of laws, even the very constitution of Ghana that we use talks about or prescribes the issue of child labor. And specifically Article 28(2) says that every child has a right to be protected from engaging in work that is detrimental to their health, education and development. Following from that, Ghana went further to develop the Children's Act, for which Part 5 of that act has been dedicated to engagement of children, and here it's clearly spelled out what children can do and what they cannot do. So if you go in there, Mr. Ahmad was talking about the age specification. So we have 3 categories of ages that children and what they can do. So below 13 years in Ghana, and this is coming from another international instrument that Ghana has ratified, which I will mention to you. So based on those international instruments, if you are below 13 years, you are not supposed to engage in any employment activity. But that doesn't mean you should not support your parents in some activities in the home, maybe home activities. Your parents are farmers or any activity they do, you can be there, maybe learning and then doing some little that may not constitute any threat to you. Then from 13 to 14, government says they are supposed to be in light work, and that's the name suggests. It should not deprive them of their opportunity to attend school and remain in school and benefit from education instruction, it will not have any detrimental effect on their health and then on their development. And 15 to 17, this age group are the youth. They are youth and their children. So they can be legally employed and work with the same duration as adults. However, they are not supposed to be in hazardous or the worst form of child labor, which I will explain that one too. Aside the laws, government has come out with policies. One of them has been the National Plans of Action for the Elimination of Child Labor. We've implemented one from 2009 to 2015, the second from 2018 to 2021, and we just launched the third plan, which we call the Ghana Accelerated Plan of Action. Here we added the accelerated to emphasize the intensified component I mentioned, which was launched on 12th of this last month as government's strategy to address child labor in Ghana. When you go in there, there are clear strategies in there that will government is calling on its agencies and other partners supporting the elimination of child labor. Aside to that, we can look at the other educational and social intervention programs that are in place to ensure that children go to school and they remain in school. The school feeding program, the free SH, and those other things are other policy interventions being implemented by government. And then the leave, we know that vulnerabilities are part of the factor that force people to put their children into this child labor you're talking about. So the social intervention programs implemented by government, the LEAP is the one now that comes to mind easily. So these are a handful of some of the interventions government is implementing. And then maybe to end it, going back to other international instruments government has also ratified. The International Labour Organization has two main conventions on children. The first is this, I have a copy, which is the Convention on the Minimum Age, that is countries to determine the age at which children should be admitted to employment. So the age government set in Ghana is what I did mention, 13 to 14 to be in light work, 15 to 17 to be in legal employment. Then we have the worst form of child labor convention, convention number 182. So the child labor we mentioned has degrees. Like there are other parts, which is that one is the worst form, that children should not even venture at all. And there are 4 categories of this. The first is, we're calling them the slave-like activities or trafficking or death bondage, that you give away a child to go and work to service a debt that the society or the family is owing, or you trade in children. They trade in children, you give the children out under the excuse that you're going to help the child or to learn trade or to go to school. They end up there being put into work from morning till evening. So the first category is that type I talk about, slavery-like activities that we put children into. The second category is talking about any activity giving children into pornographic performance or into prostitution. And then the third aspect of the worst form is giving away to another. You procure, you use, or you offer them for illicit activities, and we are specific on drug peddling, narcotic drugs. And the fourth one, which is not specific, but say is any type of work which by its nature or circumstance in which it is performed is likely to harm the safety, moral and health of the child. And here governments are allowed to come out with list of activities that are hazardous to the health of the child. So here we're not looking at the entire work, but we're looking at some components of that work. So if I'm to take maybe farming, for instance, specifically cocoa farming, you list all the activities involved and you indicate that with their associated health implications, the risk. So we said this one children can engage in it, this they cannot engage in it. So we have that list talking about what children can do as light work and then what they cannot do at all as the hazardous work.
So we've talked about how children can be a part of earning or the economy of the family in a safe way. What happens to those who flout the rules? And are we seeing enough convictions of perpetrators of crimes against children when it comes to child labor?
Thank you. As my colleague has just mentioned, in Ghana we have laws that prohibit or protect children against the engagement in issues of child labor. And so there are child labor and its worst forms are criminal offenses, and for that matter, must be prosecuted by the police. And so if anybody is engaged in such practices, that person will be arraigned before the court and be prosecuted. For example, if it's child labor, you can be sentenced to 2 years or a fine, or both. If it comes to trafficking, for instance, you can be jailed for 5 years or fine, or both. And so these laws are in place to ensure that people do not engage in such practices. I must say that prosecutions have been ongoing since last we have started this journey. Last year, for instance, about 14 or 15 people were sentenced on these practices. This year, too, some people have been prosecuted, and some are also still being prosecuted. So it is not something that you can engage in and go scot-free. There are laws, and if you flout the law, you will be prosecuted accordingly.
We are told that the causes of child labor, and your colleague said it, that sometimes the family situation make parents or guardians or caretakers desperate to engage or to employ children in some of these forms of work. And the government interventions that you mentioned are working. But I'm sure that you still have challenges. What are some of those when you come across the cases that need attention? What do you find to be the hindrances to achieving some of the targets we've set for ourselves?
I think talking about the prosecution, that is there to deter others from also engaging in that. And at times there are interferences there. Assuming I've given somebody out and the police have apprehended me, that is why you may hear other opinion leaders, some politicians calling in our chiefs and others to just take the case out of court for it to be settled in the house. So this has been one of the critical challenges facing the prosecution, and police are having this challenge in addressing or prosecuting the offenders. The second one has to do with our shelters. So when you apprehend this, the children must be kept so that you're able to deduce the evidence from them to be used in court.
Is that social welfare?
Yeah, we don't have enough for the police, so it is hindering the work. Where do you can, because keeping them is a very cost intensive. So you need to keep, at times you pick the children right from where they were doing the work, and you must take them to the shelters. Right from what they wear, what they eat, to their all sanitary and other must be catered for by that institution. So if you don't have such or many of these in place, it will hinder the work of the law enforcement institutions. So basically, and then at times, people also try to be on the ostensible excuse that, oh, it is our culture. Oh, I'm just learning, taking them to learn. So they seem not to agree to it that it is an offense. So if this thing is happening even at our backyard, volunteered information to police become an issue, or the law enforcers. So there are a lot of this going on in our various localities, but people are not forthcoming to volunteer the information to the appropriate quarters for them to take the necessary actions. So basically, these are some of the issues. I'm talking about schools. We know, yes, there is an improvement in our schools and other things, but still when you go to the most remote areas, you see that the schools are not there, and that is why we are preaching that the children should go to school, have access to school. But where there is no schools, or the conditions of the school are not conducive enough to entice the children to be there, the tendency of them not going to the school and then finding something to do has become one of the biggest challenges. But thankfully, there are partners that are also supporting the government efforts as well.
And it's exactly the last point I want to raise with you. How can people support you? Do you have a program coming up, and how can people just do their own bit in their own small way to make sure that these things are reduced, these instances of child labor, hazardous work and whatnot are reduced?
Yeah, thank you. Everybody, the fight against child labor is everybody's business. It's not only the government business. So in any way that you can support as an individual, as a company, or whatever, you can do that and then support the issue of what government is doing to ensure that children are not engaged in child labor. And I must say that One of the issues that actually challenge the fight against child labor is the lack of coordination and collaboration among stakeholders. And what happens is stakeholders are working in silos and are not putting their efforts together to ensure that the fight is fought holistically. And the challenge is that when you go to some of the communities and you see a particular partner working on the issue of child labor, the focus is on one particular sector. And so if that partner succeeds in getting children out of that sector, they may move into another sector. For example, if you are focusing on child labor in cocoa, you succeed in moving children out of cocoa, but they may end up going into mining. For example, in Ghana, we have cocoa and mining are like twin brothers in areas where these products come from. So if we don't have that kind of collaboration and effective coordination, that is also going to be a challenge to the fight against the menace.
Thank you for sitting with us this morning and for having this conversation. Mr. Mauli Abuto is the Deputy Director for Public Education at the Commission for Human Rights and Administrative Justice, SHRAJ, also representative of SHRAJ on the National Steering Committee on Child Labour. He's been here with Mr. Peter Entry, Deputy Director, Policy Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation at the Ministry of Employment and Labour Relations, also the focal person on child labour. Gentlemen, we appreciate your time with us this morning for highlighting some of these issues. So read more about child labour, find out what children can and cannot do at what age, and by all means support efforts, whether it's on the government side or with the government partners, to make sure that children are kept safe at all times. Eliminating child labour has been the focus of this conversation. We'll try and give you some sugar before we leave. Vanilla will serve some kiliwili after this.
Vanilla has decided to come serve us with some good stuff.
Yeah.
Man, what's up?
You guys have been supporting me so much since the beginning of my career.
Yes.
And so if I'm doing something like this, it's just right. I give pass through to give you your fair share for all the love and support so far. The new one is Kelewele, as you know. So it's part of the rollout for the song. We are making Kelewele and sharing it. Nice way to activate the song also.
Yes.
Kelewele. It be hot though.
Hot and spicy.
What's the point of having?
I was thinking of going to have cocoa, but I can have Kelewele with cocoa.
Yeah, and you know this is a secret. This is a secret.
Oh, the secret sauce.
Dip it in there.
Wait, hold on.
Kelewele dip.
He said Kelewele is what?
Cocoa.
Why?
They're all Ghanaian food.
Food for the gods.
Hashtag food for the gods.
Put the sauce there.
So now we are claiming to be God.
Tell me how it tastes.
So this is GTV breakfast to the whole vanilla we are saying.
Let them know how it tastes.
It's awesome. The peppers.
You want to know how it tastes? Come to the studio.
Yes.
I've never eaten Kelewele with pepper before.
But you're not leaving
Like this, I don't like hard Kelewele.
No.
Guys, so while you enjoy your weekend, remember that Kelewele is out.
Yeah.
Buy Vanilla.
On all streaming platforms.
All streaming platforms. Thank you, Vanilla, for this. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
This has been our
Already
show.
without a pepper.
But because we are eating, Vanilla, because we are eating, and
You should laugh.
you should end the show for us. End more show on how.
Guys, but don't forget, Within Africa is on GBC
Exactly.
Music at 4:05 p.m. Today, a new show bringing you stories from Africa by Africans.
Real guerrilla advertiser. I love it. Yes. If you don't wait for anybody to hype you, hype yourself.
Oh, yes. I'm hyping myself and GBC. You should watch it.
And so Vanilla, kindly usher us out of the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, Ghana. You just enjoyed another beautiful show, breakfast show, right here on GBC, GTV. I hope you enjoyed yourself. My name is Vanilla. Don't go nowhere. This is the station of the whole nation. Keep it locked.
We like
Yes, I'm a house once now. Hey, we out.
Kelewele.